There's a pattern I've noticed that shows up everywhere. People start something with incredible enthusiasm. They're fired up, they're motivated, they can see the vision clearly. And then, somewhere along the way, they stop. Not because the path disappeared, not because it was impossible, but because they convinced themselves it wasn't working. Here's the thing that nobody tells you. The moment you want to quit is usually the exact moment you're about to break through. It's like digging for water. You could be 1 foot away from hitting the spring, but because you can't see through the dirt, you assume there's nothing there. So you stop digging, you move to a different spot, and you start all over again. The real tragedy isn't that people fail, it's that they abandon ship right before they would have succeeded. They switch directions when they should have stayed the course. They interpret temporary obstacles as permanent dead ends, and they do this over and over again, creating a cycle where they're perpetually starting from scratch instead of building on what they've already learned. Think about it this way. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every few days to check if it's growing. You water it, you make sure it gets sunlight, you trust the process. But somehow, when it comes to our goals, our businesses, our creative projects, we don't give them that same patience. We want instant proof that it's working. We want visible results immediately. And when we don't get them, we conclude that the seed must be dead. But that's not how growth works. Growth happens beneath the surface first. The roots spread before the plant breaks through the soil. The foundation gets built before the structure becomes visible. The skills develop in private before the performance shines in public. There's always a lag between effort and evidence. Always. The problem is that we live in a world that's conditioned us to expect immediate feedback. We post something online and we get likes within seconds. We send a message and expect a response within minutes. We order something and it arrives the next day. So when we work on something meaningful, something that actually takes time to develop, our brains start freaking out. Where are the likes? Where's the feedback? Where's the proof that this is working? And in that moment of doubt, we start looking around. We see other people who seem to be succeeding faster. We see different methods, different approaches, different shortcuts, and we think, maybe I'm on the wrong path. Maybe I should try what they're doing. Maybe there's a better way. So we switch. We abandon what we were building and start something new. And for a little while, it feels good. It feels like progress. There's that initial excitement again, that sense of possibility. But what we don't realize is that we've just reset the clock. We're back at the beginning, and the cycle starts all over again. The truth is, most strategies work if you give them enough time. That's not to say every idea is brilliant. Some paths genuinely aren't dead ends. But far more often, the path is fine, the method is sound, the strategy is viable. What's missing isn't a better plan, it's the commitment to see the current plan through the hard part. Because here's what nobody wants to hear. There's always a hard part. There's always a phase where you don't know what you're doing, where things aren't clicking yet, where you're putting in effort but not seeing proportional returns. This phase is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're learning. It's a sign that you're in the gap between beginner and competent, and the only way through that gap is time and repetition. But we've been sold this myth that if something is right for you, it should feel easy, that if you're on the correct path, things should flow, that struggle means you're forcing something that isn't meant to be, and that's complete nonsense. Struggle means you're growing. Discomfort means you're expanding beyond your current capabilities. Confusion means you're encountering something new that your brain hasn't mapped yet. The people who break through are not smarter, they're not more talented, they're not luckier, they're just more stubborn. They're willing to feel stupid for longer. They're willing to be bad at something for more days in a row. They're willing to sit in the uncertainty without needing immediate reassurance that it's all going to work out. There's this phase that every single person goes through when they're developing a skill or building something significant. I call it the desert. You've left behind the excitement of the beginning. The newness is worn off. You're not seeing the results you expected yet. You're too far in to easily go back, but you can't see the destination yet. You're just in the middle, and it's uncomfortable. It's boring. It's frustrating. This is where most people quit. They interpret this feeling as evidence that they're on the wrong path. But actually, this feeling is evidence that they're exactly where they need to be. The desert is not the problem. The desert is the process. And the only way to get through a desert is to keep walking. Here's another way to think about it. Imagine you're boiling water. You put the pot on the stove, you turn on the heat, and you wait. At first, nothing happens. The water just sits there. You wait longer, still nothing. You might even touch the pot and think, is this even getting warmer? More time passes, still no boiling. Just lukewarm water that doesn't look any different than when you started. Now, if you didn't understand how boiling works, you might conclude at this point that your stove is broken, or that this particular pot doesn't work, or that you need a different technique. So you turn off the heat, dump out the water, and try something else. But here's the thing, the water was heating up the entire time. The energy was accumulating. It was working. You just couldn't see it yet. If you had waited just a little bit longer, you would have seen the bubbles. You would have seen the evidence that it was working all along. That's what quitting too early looks like. You're turning off the heat right before the water boils. You're stopping the process right before the transformation happens, not because it wasn't working, but because you couldn't see that it was. The most successful people I've observed all have one thing in common. It's not intelligence, it's not connections, it's not even work ethic, although that matters. It's their tolerance for non-results. It's their ability to keep doing the thing even when there's no immediate evidence that it's paying off. They trust the process more than they trust their current feelings about the process. And here's why that matters so much. Progress is not linear. It doesn't increase at a steady, predictable rate. It compounds, it accumulates beneath the surface, and then suddenly breaks through all at once. You work for weeks with minimal visible progress, and then suddenly everything clicks. You struggle for months, and then in 1 week, you make more progress than the previous 3 months combined. But you only get to experience that breakthrough if you're still there when it happens. If you've already moved on to the next thing, you never get to collect on all that accumulated effort. You never get to see what would have happened if you had just stuck it out a little bit longer. Think about how many times you've started something and then stopped. Think about how many books you've read the first 3 chapters of but never finished. How many workout routines you've done for 2 weeks and then abandoned. How many projects you've started with enthusiasm and then let fade away. How many skills you've dabbled in but never developed. Now imagine if you had picked just one of those things and seen it through. Where would you be right now? How much would you have developed? What would you have learned? What would you have built? The cost of constantly switching isn't just the time you lose starting over, it's all the compounding gains you never get to experience. It's the expertise you never develop. It's the pattern recognition you never build because you never stick with something long enough to actually get good at it. And here's the psychological trap that keeps people stuck in this cycle. Switching feels like progress. When you start something new, there's that rush of possibility. You're learning again. You're excited again. Your brain interprets this as moving forward, but you're not moving forward. You're moving sideways. You're accumulating a bunch of surface-level knowledge about lots of things instead of deep expertise in anything. And deep expertise is what creates real results. Deep expertise is what allows you to see opportunities that others miss. Deep expertise is what gives you the confidence to make decisions quickly. Deep expertise is what makes the work feel easier because you've already made all the mistakes and learned all the lessons. But you can't develop deep expertise if you keep jumping ship. You can't get good at something if you quit every time it gets hard. You can't break through if you're always resetting back to the beginning. So what's the solution? How do you know when to persist and when to pivot? How do you distinguish between productive struggle and banging your head against a wall? First, you need to get honest about why you want to quit. Is it because the strategy genuinely isn't working? Or is it because you're in the uncomfortable middle phase where you don't know what you're doing yet? Is it because the path is actually blocked? Or is it because you can't see around the next corner? Is it because there's new information that suggests this won't work? Or is it because you're bored and distracted by something shinier? Second, you need to set a minimum commitment timeline before you even start. Decide in advance how long you're going to give something before you evaluate whether it's working. Not 2 weeks, not a month, at least 6 months, preferably a year. Give yourself enough time to get past the initial excitement, through the boring middle, and to the point where you're actually competent enough to see results. Third, you need to focus on the process, not just the outcome. Are you doing the things you know you should be doing? Are you showing up consistently? Are you learning from your mistakes? Are you improving incrementally? If yes, then you're making progress even if you can't see the results yet. The results will come. They're lagging indicators. The process is what you control. Fourth, you need to recognize that not knowing what to do is part of the process. It's not a sign you're failing. It's not evidence you need to change strategies. It's just information that you need to learn something. So instead of quitting, ask better questions, seek out resources, find people who've done what you're trying to do, learn what you don't know. That's part of walking the path, not a reason to abandon it. And finally, you need to understand that the breakthrough moment often comes right after you want to quit. That's not a coincidence. That's the pattern. The moment of maximum doubt is usually right before the moment of clarity. The point where you feel like giving up is usually right before the point where things start to click. So when you feel like quitting, pause. Ask yourself, have I actually given this enough time? Have I been consistent enough? Have I learned what I need to learn? Have I made all the mistakes I need to make? Or am I just uncomfortable because I'm in the gap between starting and succeeding? Most of the time, you're closer than you think. Most of the time, the breakthrough is just around the corner. Most of the time, the water's about to boil, but you'll never know if you turn off the heat now. The people who win are not the people who never doubt themselves. They're the people who doubt themselves and keep going anyway. They're the people who feel like quitting and choose to show up tomorrow. They're the people who can't see the path ahead, but trust that if they keep walking, it will reveal itself. You don't need a better strategy. You don't need more information. You don't need perfect clarity. You just need to stick with what you're doing long enough to get good at it, long enough to learn the lessons, long enough to build the skills, long enough to see what happens when you don't quit. Because here's the final truth that most people never learn. Consistency over time beats intensity in the moment. Showing up every day for a year beats going all in for a week. Steady progress beats sporadic bursts of effort. Boring repetition beats constant novelty. The path up the mountain is not complicated. It's just long. And the only way you don't make it to the top is if you stop walking. So keep walking. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work even when you can't see the results yet. Trust that the accumulation is happening beneath the surface. Trust that the breakthrough is coming. And whatever you do, don't quit right before it works.